the rise of digital payments across the world and how different countries are migrating to a cashless society in their own different ways. Just to give, I guess, some context, I think in like 2000s, cash was still king, and then most payments were done using cash. But now in like the 2020s, a lot of places are actually cashless and do take payments in a variety of forms. In Canada and a lot of the, I guess, developed worlds, it's Visa payments, Visa, MasterCard credit systems. In like third world countries or places that aren't Western dominated, it's, for example, in China, it's what's it called? WeChat does a lot of payments through like QR codes. In India, you have the UIP system. Bangladesh has Bcash. There's other systems in like use throughout Africa. So it's an interesting shift. And the main, I guess, the main driver of this change has not been, innovation in the financial system. It's been ubiquitous access to your phone, this thing. So just wanted to talk to you guys. What are your thoughts on this? Do you guys see this system being more entrenched, or do you see it evolving? But yeah.
Turan, what do you think about that?
A cashless system being more entrenched?
Yeah.
Oh, I think eventually it'll be 100%. I think there'll always be 1 or 2% where there's physical transactions that is done for whatever reason, maybe technical difficulties or whatever the issue is, right? But I think we're getting closer and closer there as a society for sure. I just sent a link in the WhatsApp if you guys want to open that and maybe share it. It's cool because it talks about how it talks about what countries are still reliant on cash in 2022, and the
I'm
article
just
is only
pulling it
about
up.
6 months old. So there's plenty of opportunity for countries like the ones on that you'll probably show on screen right now. Countries like Morocco, Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria. These are people that have internet access. For example, Morocco, apparently according to the data here, they have 84% of the people have internet access, but they seem to be one of the top countries still relying on cash, which is very
That
interesting,
is
right?
interesting to me. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
why do you guys think that is?
maybe it's just the way the culture is. I've never been to
Yeah.
Morocco. I don't know how, but I would think it's just the way the culture is. What do you guys?
hmm I think culture does play a large part. So maybe it's just distrust in digital systems in general. I guess counterpoint. I forget which country this was, but it wasn't a super developed country. But they have a system where you can do cash transfers using SMS.
Yes.
Yeah,
But what do you
yeah.
mean by
I think that
cashless
I think that actually
transfers?
maybe India, like you can send money through SMS,
Yeah.
and their rationale was it's like just making
Mhm.
banking more accessible, right? And I wonder if, since Morocco is such a high like internet usage but still very cash dependent, I wonder if more people have access to like a quality bank or bank they just don't want to move from.
Well. Look at the right column, guys. The extreme right column. The unbanked population. 71%
Oh,
is
Mm.
never.
unbanked. So I think that there's our answer right there, right? That's probably why they use cash, because they probably save in cash. They have nowhere to save it,
So
Mm-hmm.
hang
right?
on a minute. That means in Morocco, 71% of the population does
Yeah.
not store their actual wealth in a bank.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing
That's
when I see that
scary. That
number.
is scary.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So that what that leads to is distrust of the government or any institutions, right?
I don't know if it's even distrust. Yeah, and that may be part of it, but I also think that they just make it more challenging in those countries. Like in Nigeria, which is number 4 on the list, it's extremely challenging to get a bank. I think it's
Yeah.
also, there's a lot of criteria, there's a lot of restrictions. Like you're gonna have a certain amount of money, things of that nature, certain net worth. That's what I understand, and I think that's why it is the case. Go ahead, Cole.
No, that's all I was thinking. To be honest, I'm just surprised that's the thing. To me, that just screams opportunity in a certain way. But
Yeah.
I've realized that as much as the innovation curve is there or innovations required in a certain sector, the
Mm-hmm.
cultural shift is probably one of the biggest hurdles anybody
Mm-hmm.
can overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to push a certain philosophy on certain people, I think that is very important because without it, you're unable to get adoption at the end of the day, right? And as we know, our financial system is very reliant on how people think about things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild to me that, like, I don't know, I don't know if I was expected to know this in high school, but when I did learn of like bank runs and things like that, and I'm like, hang on a minute, it's just based on our trust. Like, it's not based on anything other than just trust.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like just majority of people coming together and trusting something is so powerful
Mm-hmm.
that it's like the foundation of our banking system to a certain extent, right? Which is which is pretty scary. at least it's foundation to bank. Might not be the full financial sector, but yeah.
I'll give you an
I wish we
example on
had
the culture
Ali
point where, yeah, but sorry,
because I
I'll
see
give you a
Egypt on the list.
yeah, but like an example on how culture moves slower than technology are cabs. I think I've always been stressed about getting into a cab because I don't carry cash and I haven't carried cash like for a long time. But like I want to say back in like 2010 when like tap to pay was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cabs would still ask you like, hey, can you pay in cash? And I'm like, bro, what do you mean pay in cash? Like,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's partly what fueled Uber. It's like, at least you don't have to deal with the money exchange and you're guaranteed to have a payment plan. Whereas if you got a
Yeah.
cab and then you get to your destination, you can arrive there and the guy's like, okay, it's like $25. Like my payment machine isn't working. It's like, dude,
Right.
what do you mean your payment machine isn't working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So see, I think what you found like a really important nuanced point, I think, or a cultural shift, and I think it was by design as well. And I think you mentioned this, Mo, a couple episodes ago, where you were talking about how credit cards, they in Canada especially, they've made tap so that they've done so much research into making that feedback loop smaller and smaller and with less hurdles. So when we now, that's why in America, like think about when you like kind of put in a card, there is no tap. So you put in your number, right, and that creates one hurdle. Second, you have to sign, so you know exactly what you're signing up for, right? Like you're verifying that you've just paid for this, so you look at the receipt, right? You know how much you've just paid. Versus having tap, it removes the first barrier, which is the card number, so you don't type in any numbers. Plus, you don't look at the cost amount, right? And now it's even worse where, so for example, I don't even have to take my card out. I use my phone. Like for example, when I go to Timmy's, sometimes I forget my wallet, and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot my card. What am I gonna do? I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. I have my Tim Hortons app connected to my credit card, so all I do is scan their thing, and I get points. So it doesn't even show me how much I paid.
Yo, that's huge.
You know what I mean? And so it's like removing barrier until you just don't know how much you've just spent, right?
Yeah.
I'm forgetting my original point of where I was going with this.
It makes it easy to spend money.
Yeah, it makes it easy to spend money. I guess that was my point. But
Yo,
yeah.
that's a great point, man. You just like unlocked something in my brain because I was noticing this with myself over the past few months where I started taking notice. I'm like yo, I don't look at what the final amount is anymore. And I thought it was something in me. I was like, am I not caring? Like, why am I not focused on that? Right? Or like if I'm grocery shopping, I'll look at okay, have they scanned the items correctly and stuff. I don't even do that anymore. And you're absolutely right because back in the day when we used to swipe our card or put it into the thing, it would show you what the amount is and is this okay, right? Whereas now it just says tap here. It doesn't even
Exactly.
say the amount. And then I realized
Exactly.
like when you said that, I was like, oh shit, so that's what it is. It's just like
Yeah.
we've eliminated that step now where we look at what the amount is, and then it has happened when I've paid for something. I'm like, oh wait, it's wrong, and then I have to go
Right.
back, and then it creates a process, and then now you're like, do I want to sit through this for saving a couple dollars, right? Or do I
Exactly.
just want to move on with my day? Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that actually was the point. So I just remembered. It's what I was talking about is the hurdle, right? Like
Yeah.
the culture change and the psychology that goes behind this whole system, right? Changing the psychology of adoption and what the hurdles are to any system is so important. And you think about it, it actually applies everywhere. It's crazy how much psychology applies to even software and engineering principles. We talked about that elevator and mirror thing where because the elevators were going slow, they just put mirrors in front of the elevators so that people wouldn't mind waiting because they're just looking at themselves. So it's like things like that. There's so many examples where psychology plays a role. And I'm wondering like how we can kind of bridge a gap between innovation and psychology and just see if there's opportunity there.
Yeah, to Taran's point about how we never check anything, I just realized my entire trip, I paid stuff through obviously Visa because I didn't take a ton of cash with me. But like I'm thinking back, I'm like, there's never been a point where like I stop back to think like, oh, whatever they're adding on the tap, like is it the amount that I expected it to be? Because like a lot of times
Yeah.
they don't have the full payment system. They have like the little square like tablet thing where you just tap it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, they could have. But like, to be fair, I think when you do tap, it gives you like a notification on your phone saying this is how much you are charged, but you don't get the itemized bill.
You don't get the itemized bill, but also you need to install that app. Like I have a TD Spend app, which gives me that notification on my phone. Okay, I've just spent
Yeah.
this total amount.
CIBC.
But
CIBC does that too.
yeah, but I don't think most people have, because TD's like a TD's bank app is different from the TD Spend account app.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so they're two separate apps.
Oh,
You can,
that's dumb.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's dumb. That's so
but
dumb.
that's the hurdle. They don't want you to see that.
Oh, Apple at least, like I pay stuff with Apple Pay, and it does show you like this is what amount comes up to, right? Because it's system wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the bank though. That's why, right? Because
Mhm.
Apple is just, it's saying it's gonna send that information to the bank later, so it's like I can just show you right
I
now, which
mean,
makes sense.
Apple is not a bank. I mean, I don't know, with their credit card and their
Uh,
savings account, they actually
fair
might be a bank now.
Fair enough.
Oh, if you got more than $1 billion, or sorry, $100 billion in cash sitting in reserves,
Yeah.
you're a bank.
Honestly, I think what they should do is either, I don't know what would be more beneficial. They should just open up a sideline of an insurance company or side business of a bank. Like they should do either or. They have so much cash flow that they could probably do that.
But just a funny point on the tap to go. I don't know if you guys have this at your churches or gurdwaras, but I've seen in mosques they have the tap to donate like stations that like it's like, hey, just tap it, you'll donate $5.
That's awesome. So it's funny because like we always joke about that. We'd be like, it'd be because the way Gurdwara is, you kind of go and there's like a container right in front of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and you usually just put like couple dollars or things like that, right? And it will be given in cash usually, right? And so we would joke around about that. We'd be like, it'd be hilarious if they had like tap machines, and we'd be like, oh, eventually it'll get there. But I can't believe that actually happens in religious institutions. That's amazing.
Yeah, man.
I think it
But
makes
I
sense,
did.
though.
Yeah, it's a huge. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. But I did want to bring it back to the original, I guess, our podcast or topic.
Yeah.
So, like in the podcast, they're mentioning how each country has its own like separate system that is cashless.
Mhm.
I guess Canada, Europe, America, it's visas. In China, it's WePay. In India, it's UIP, I think, the Unified Something Protocol
Yeah.
for bank to bank. Yeah. And then Bangladesh has Bcash. But what now I'm wondering is that like if you're moving money between these separate systems, what's the defined route, right? Like not even as like a big business, like as a traveler, how do you navigate these multiple payment formats?
Yeah, I personally think like that's where this Swift and sipping comes into play, right? What they have is the ability to move money from country to country, and you need that level protocol to be able to define that. But once you have that, and I believe like the best step for them moving forward, again, there might be somebody much smarter and
Bitcoin.
actually more well formed, than me. But I think even in this financial system, they should allow APIs to hook into Swift, right? They already have companies that allow you to have APIs to be able to initiate these payments, etc., and things like that. Why not Swift create their own so that you could have abundant amount of these mini neo banks that come up and provide these services? And now you increase the world commerce just by allowing these neo banks to kind of come up and be able to facilitate these transactions, right? You're just gonna have more deal flow going throughout the world, more commerce. It just makes more sense, I think.
Yeah, but like that makes sense if you're a business transferring like or making payments from one country to another, right? Because you don't really care if it's going to take a day or two to clear. Say you're a tourist and you're just trying to buy like some shit like this,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think the merchant's going to be like, hey, yeah, I'll wait like 2 days for your Swift transaction to clear these hurdles. Like
right, and that's my point, right? It's like, for example, I think bank to bank, it's not like you're transferring money to them, right?
Mhm.
Your bank is transferring money to them,
Yeah.
to their bank, right? And so it's like that's where that intermediary comes in. It says, okay, this, we have a understanding, and even if it takes 2 days to clear actual clearance of like those funds, we know we got you, right? Because that's how Visa works. Visa says it's an intermediary. It's like, yeah, payment went through, they're valid, they haven't passed their limit, this transaction will go through. It's not posted yet, but we've cleared it on our behalf, so the merchant gets their money right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's the system that needs to be put in place so that you can have worldwide commerce.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Swift is like probably the only one that has these arrangements across many countries right now.
Yeah, I think this a part of it ties back into our earlier episode where Ali was complaining very much about transaction costs. And I feel like all these hurdles are going to add more overhead for the transaction costs. So now that if I pull out my credit card to pay in China, the guy's going to be like, nah, bro, like whatever thing you're buying for 50 cents, I'm going to make 2 cents profit off it because the rest
Yeah,
of it's going to be eaten by transaction costs.
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's where something like Bitcoin is useful.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us, Trent, how do you think? I know that you've mentioned Strike before.
Yeah.
How do you guys see that play out? Like, what is the gap from us being able to deal with Bitcoin end to end, kind of going to a different country and things along those lines? Is there any gap, or do you think that's possible right now?
I think the approach should be using Bitcoin as the payment rails. So, where the person doesn't really have to interact with Bitcoin or need to understand how crypto works or get a software wallet for that matter, right? Like, for example, going back to Strike, as you mentioned, I mentioned that earlier. Strike is not available in all countries, it's only available in select countries. But the countries that it works in, for example, El Salvador, I wouldn't be surprised if there's data on them being a society that still relies on cash, and now they're slowly moving into a digital system. But the digital system is a Bitcoin system where there's a town in Salvador. I think it's called Bitcoin Beach. They've named it Bitcoin Beach, where they mostly transact in Bitcoin. But in that case,
Mm,
they have a Bitcoin wallet, and they had to educate the population on Bitcoin a little bit, right? But I think to scale it, you have to get to a point where the population shouldn't need to know what Bitcoin is, how to interact with wallets, and I think that will eliminate the barrier of entry. And so if you can get to a point where they can just use an app and tap, and then it'll connect to the bank account, right? And then it'll convert the fiat dollar into the fiat dollar that they're exchanging in or sending money to, as you said, for country to country transfers. And that exchange the exchange happens over the Bitcoin system, the Bitcoin protocol. And so there isn't any interaction from the user standpoint. They just simply have to mention how much they want to transfer, and then that exchange occurs on the blockchain.
right. So, but what about the exchange rate, right? Like the whole issue with people
Hmm.
that they have with Bitcoin is the fact that it's so volatile. They're like, we can't transact in it because if 1 minute I'm buying something for 500 sats, it was
Yeah.
costing me $10. Now it's costing me $15 5 minutes later. Like, what do I do about that?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Using Bitcoin as a payment rail, as the tracks for banking. So you're not relying on Bitcoin being the currency denomination. So you're not actually paying something in Bitcoin. Its transaction is just happening using the Bitcoin protocol. So it
I see
would
what you're saying.
you see what I'm saying? So say I'll put it in numbers. I want to transfer 10 Canadian dollars to 10 USD, right? The only exchange rate I need to worry about is the exchange rate between US and Canada. The conversion will occur over the blockchain, right? And it occurs instantaneously, where the volatility of Bitcoin shouldn't matter.
Right.
Um, though, like, I
There
think,
is a little bit of lag because
yeah,
it has to go from, but I guess yeah,
But
how fast does that occur?
Strike has figured that out, right? Strike has figured that out. There is a video online of the CEO of Strike, Jack Mallers, that's his name, yeah. And he literally shows how he sends $10 USD from his apartment in New York to someone in El Salvador within a blink of an eye. Like, it's a 1 minute long video or less, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
yeah,
So what were
but
your
like,
concerns, man? Yeah.
yeah. Sorry. The thing is, though, is like the conversion from US to Canadian is it's obviously changing minute by minute, but in general, there's a certain a certain conversion rate, right? And, like it doesn't jump too much. It's like what, like 30% is how I can
Hmm.
do the math in my
Yeah.
head when trying to buy something in USD. In like Bitcoin, it is volatile enough that like I would actually have to look up an exchange rate before
You
like
wouldn't
thinking
need
of
to.
making. So
If you're doing it, so what it would do, it would go USD to Bitcoin and Bitcoin to CAD, but it would happen instantaneously, where the transfer, Bitcoin is helping with the transfer, because you guys
I
understand how
see.
Bitcoin works, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So yeah, so you're buying Bitcoin without actually buying Bitcoin. The transfer happens over Bitcoin to Bitcoin and then immediately converts to Canadian.
My question though is, isn't there like some kind of risk for Strike in the system where Strike, like say, you send $10 and it converts into BTC, the price lowers for BTC on the receiving end. Strike actually has to pay more than.
You know, you know how you get around that? You do margin of error on both ends, and
Mhm.
and
I was
then
just
you,
gonna
you
mention.
scale up the price a little bit, so it become a bit more expensive. And that's where the
Yeah.
transaction fees come in, right? Their
Yep.
conversion will be higher.
Yep.
For $10 on the real market, it might be
Yep.
$11 here, right? And so now they have that margin of error. So if it goes down by that much,
Hmm.
and they've probably calculated how much it goes up and down every minute to minute, and figured out probably some sort of margin of error that actually makes sense. And now they
Yep.
can just, every time.
Doesn't
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
add friction, or like doesn't that help them not compete against something like Swift or
But
other?
but it's so now it's a question of whether the fees of the conversion that might hit within like a minute, let's say, how much that volatility is that a higher price for people to pay versus the speed at which they can transfer and the friction of not being able to transfer around the world, right? Because
Mhm.
transferring to, like, let's say I wanted to transfer to my relatives in India, I just like, it's so hard. It's insanely hard. Why I
Yeah.
have to make like some sort of Remitly account or go to Western
Or
Union to do the
wise.
send this,
Or
and they have to
wise.
like, or why, yeah, and then just go there physically, tell them some sort of like number that they have to tell that person, and then they get that cash in rupees. The fact that that needs to happen in 2023 is mind-boggling. So I think I do understand how Bitcoin as a payment rails actually makes sense and could be viable.
Yeah, and just to go on your point there, you might want to check out Wise because Wise is a lot easier, I think, than what you just mentioned. My
Okay.
experience with Wise has been you just you transfer over the amount and it the recipient receives an email saying that the money was transferred. Of course they have to give
Mm.
their bank account information to you. You're essentially wiring it to their bank in that country, and then they just go to their bank and they would have to access it the way they access.
Yeah, because right now I have to like send a pigeon across the world so they can receive my freaking authentication code, right? It's
Yeah, you got to
crazy.
check out Wise. You got to check out Wise. I think it sounds a lot. It solves that problem for now. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
Bitcoin solves that
My
problem.
pigeon problem.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin would solve that problem forever by it
Yeah.
being a
Yeah.
payment
I,
rails. And I think that's what the society is missing right now. This is my personal opinion. People are viewing Bitcoin as just an asset or a form of currency or whatever, but it could be used as a payment rail to have transactions take place on. And I think with that we could eventually get to a fully cashless society.
yeah. So
Bitcoin
okay,
isn't
but
an asset; it is a trusted network.
Yes.
there
Yes.
you go.
Yeah,
I
And
think
it's
Mo's
trusted
finally getting it.
software.
Now he's gonna buy
yeah,
some Bitcoin rather than Ethereum.
Oh yeah, I
no, no,
just
no.
took that in. Yeah,
I'm a I'm an ETH guy all the way, but we are coming up on time. I just wanted to
Yep.
end it off with a funny story that I was listening to earlier. And it comes into trusted networks. And how previously, and it's actually still in place. To transfer money, you would just hand it off to a trusted someone. They would hand it off to a trusted someone, and then somehow, some way, it will get to your person that you wanted to transfer from. And I guess all these digital, not like these crypto networks, are just an evolution of that. But it's funny to think that like in 2023, those kind of those person-to-person networks still exist and operate. And I wonder,
Yeah.
I probably have very low transaction costs.
Oh yeah, like those still exist. It's called the Havala method or Havala network.
Yeah.
That's what it's like known as, where you go to your local kind of person, you say, here's $100, I need it $100 in Romania or something, and they have a trusted person there, and they just call them up and say, all right, like, we will deal with the transaction later, but give the 100 that you have to that person. And now they've just removed the need to move money, but they're essentially like, they're kind of like the Swift system without the phone lines, or the internet lines. Makes sense. But yeah, I think it is a viable option. But I think one question to think about for the viewers as well as us, probably for the next time, is like, what about the Bitcoin that does get transferred to somebody else? Because that Bitcoin goes somewhere, even though it acts as a rail, it's going from one account to another account. account, right? And the person who's storing that Bitcoin, are they okay with the fact that they're giving the $10 in fiat, or does it go off ramp right away, right? And then the exchange is left holding that money because somebody's holding that Bitcoin eventually, right? Even though it's
Yeah.
acting as a payment rails, and so they need to be okay with the lowering of Bitcoin or the decrease value of Bitcoin over time. At the same time, though, is like if it's actively being used as the payments rail, it's gonna have more and more value rather than less and less value.
Yeah, I think the way around it is that just to do the conversion as is, and then add a extra cost that's explicit saying this is to cover our services, but whatever you're sending in Bitcoin, we are sending, or sorry, whatever you're sending in fiat, we're doing this conversion right now, and this is what the conversion calculated at the time of sending, and it's on you to, if it drops or it goes up, that good luck or bad luck, it's on you, but our
Wait.
transaction cost is separate from the transfer itself.
I'm confused by what you guys are saying. One, because I lost audio, but correct me if I'm wrong. So what you guys are saying is you're talking about the Bitcoin transferring over or whatever, right? But in the example that I gave, it's the Bitcoin is purchased and sold right away.
Yeah, but there's still like some I guess it's not instantaneous is what I'm trying to say, is right? Maybe it is.
So
I'm not
so
sure.
so that's the thing. And maybe we need to look into this further. But I from my experience of learning about this, it does happen instantaneous. At least with the Strike app that I saw, the demonstration I saw, it happens instantaneously.
That is something.
So I think what we'll do
Yeah.
is the next episode we'll kind of dig deep into this. I think global payments is coming around the corner for everybody to see. I think it's very close. It's an amazing world to see. So let's see. Let's hope that it actually goes that way. But I do like Turan's kind of idea of using Bitcoin as a payments rail. So I think we should show the kind of viewers a little bit more of that, right? And kind of dig deep into that. So hopefully next time we can kind of jump into that.